This meeting is being recorded.
I'm gonna go live. We're going live in my group too, but we'll be good. I want to get your workout. Okay, here we go. Awesome. Okay. Hello, Gary, and hello, wonderful. We have Gary Salyer back. We're just friends now, right, Gary? I mean, can we like
we're friends?
Yeah, I mean, there's been like some personal stuff that I've reached out to Gary about, and like some professional stuff. I'm like, Gary, you got to get on Goodreads and all this kind of stuff. So he is the author of Safe to Love Again. He's been on here before, and he is my go-to person for attachment styles. Hello, Gary. How are you?
Hello, Sarah. I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's hard to know now, like how you and I are attached, because it's like, there's been all kinds of things. So tell people a bit about you, and then we'll get into attachment styles.
So, what do you want to know about me? I'm just your regular twice divorced guy that finally got tired of, saying, the problem was women. And one day I looked in the mirror and said, son, it's you. And that really changed my life. At that point, I looked at having done 13 years of therapy and said, wait a minute. I was one of these guys that worked on it, and it didn't happen. And it just came to me in that moment that if they can't crack the code, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love it.
My life's purpose is, how do you get from anxious or avoidant to secure, or insecure as they call it.
So my whole motto and stuff, before like the podcast, like intro stuff, it says, get past the past, real about the present, and serious about the future. And my goal is a both and. You could be married to the wrong person and need to do some personal growth work before you are ready for a relationship with the right person. It's not an either or, right? It's kind of, I see some people get stuck. It's like, oh, he was terrible for you, or she was terrible for you. And it absolutely can go both ways. I had a troll on the internet today named Anne, though she like tried to change it with Facebook users. So she wouldn't know. And she was like, your lips are runner up. That was the statement she said. I guess she thought I had like fillers or done some stuff for mine. I was just born with these lips. Love them or hate them. They're just
they're yours.
There's not much to be done. I guess I could make them larger, which would be really odd. But anyway, to the point being, that was an experience I had today with a toxic female. I'm quite certain this woman is not healthy and well adjusted for her to reach out to me.
Yes, as well as maybe a little jealous. The thing here is, when we're looking at that sort of behavior, it's probably avoidant behavior. Yeah. And when we're talking about these terms, we want to get clear that anxious, avoidant. I went to a party once, and they had, and like 20 of the people had read the book Attached. And I go, man, this is a gold mine. And 15 of the 20 people I talked to all said that when they read Attachment and Attachment Theory, they got depressed. And one guy said it perfectly. He says, I had to put the book down. He says, I realized I was avoidant. And then I felt like I was walking around with a huge sign that was invisible to me, but clear to everybody else, that said, screwed. And, if whatever your attachment style is, I guarantee you, if you're listening in, your brain took the best deal available at the time. Your brain was protecting you. No brain gets up in the morning and says, how can I screw with my master? It doesn't do that. And so it's just a description of the way your brain learned to survive. And what I know from back there, from my own life and clients and everything, is that if your brain early on in childhood or in an early relationship has to choose between crappy and crappier, it'll take crappy. What the real goal is how do we get your brain to take a better deal?
And let's talk specifically about anxious attachment. I know a lot of the women that I work with, it's like, okay, we got to decide. I met him, I've known him for a week, and I need to decide, like, right now, if he's the person for me that's going to last forever. And these are the qualities. And I reach out to him this time, and then I broke up with him once, and then I'm back together with him now. And this is, this is real. And it's like, well, we're probably not going to know if he's the right person for you after a week or 2 or 3 or 4, right? Like, that would actually be very unhealthy to decide at that stage of the game. And I see that's where people get toxic relationships, because they commit themselves too early. And then when bad behavior starts showing up, they're already pre-committed, right?
Exactly.
So,
I forgot to say, when you were talking about couples, both sides contribute. My work with couples, they both do. But let's look at this anxious person's, deep down inside, the anxious, what happened originally is they got attachment, there, not there, there, not there, there, not there, got a little attention, didn't get attention, got attention, didn't get attention. And they develop what's called a fight response. Then how can I lock this thing down? And so their system is always trying to fight for that connection. How do I lock this down? And the danger signal is, whenever I get an attachment, I had better nail that thing down right away, lest it get away. And when you're first dating, that's not the goal. And there's always this other part of anxious attachment. It tends to build with a hope structure. It's more about, they learned early they didn't have it, and some parts said, that angel parent one day will really be consistent and really give me the attention I need and the love. And they idealize love in the future when they finally get it nailed down. And so they tend to have more right to hope than to have, which means they overlook the red flags that are staring them. The presidential motorcade could be driving through, and they go, what red flags? And so that it's that pressure to nail it down now. That
and
is
that's either way.
ridiculous.
If it's a great person or a great fit, and you still have that anxiousness inside of you, you could actually push a good person who has green flags away, because the relationship feels like a ton of pressure, but you've only known each other 2 or 3 weeks.
Exactly. I was, about a year ago, there was a woman that was COVID and everything, and this guy wanted to lock everything down in the first 2 weeks. Everything down. That's a big, for the secure, intimacy is something gradual. You don't just share everything. And there's a lot of times the anxious just share. And it's, it's what one woman calls instamacy, not intimacy. And that, trust is a track record. In secure attachment, the brain is secure. It's not driven by anxiousness. So there's no big rush to discover things. It's let it unfold energy. And that is the one thing that the anxious can't do, because if they had let it unfold naturally way back then, when you didn't know when you were going to get the attention, then it wasn't so good. So for them. So a lot of that, it's that fight response. I've got to lock this down. And a lot of people think that anxious, like when the book Attached came out, it kind of gave a pass to attached, to anxious people, and really criticized the avoidance. But my experience with couples is the anxious can destroy a relationship as much as the avoidant. And there was a study about that. The book Attached had this strategy. It said to the secure, hey, if you have an anxious partner, if you really love them up, they're going to be so grateful when they get that consistent love that they will turn into the most secure person. And so they'll be the most loyal of partners. And some researchers said, that's interesting advice. I wonder how that turns out in real actuality. And they did a study. And what they found out is when an anxious person pairs up with a secure person, that 68% of the time, the anxious does not become secure, but rather the anxious person pulls the secure person off their pedestal. They either become situationally avoidant or anxious themselves. So unless you're dealing with that impulse to lock it down, the anxiousness, even if you find that person who's secure, you've got a 2/3 chance of turning them into the very thing you've been running from.
And I have in Sarah's rules for living,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Hey, how can I change my behavior to change someone else's behavior? Like, this is like my golden rule of like, just don't do it, right? And I tell in my book, Becoming Toxic Person Proof, I tell the story of my grandmother, who's a very sweet woman, but we were sitting there in the car with my son, and he was talking about a bully at school. And he said, oh, this kid's bullying everybody. And my grandmother said, well, if he's bullying people, he's probably just lonely. So you should be extra nice to him so he doesn't feel so bad, so he doesn't bully. And I think if you take it into the context of children, you can kind of see that and go, and I pulled my son to the side. That's not my advice, right?
That wouldn't be my advice dealing with bullies on the schoolyard.
Yeah. Their bad behavior is their responsibility, and you could be polite. You don't have to beat up the bully. That's certainly not my advice, but don't give more access of yourself to the bully in hopes of changing their behavior, right? So similar advice to anxious attachment. If I was coaching someone, I'd say, it's not their responsibility. And that, honestly, you've given me some advice about Ben and I, which I'm happy to say publicly. It's how much I trust Gary, and, if I remember very early on in our relationship, I said something along the lines of, it wasn't his job to make me happy. And he had some very unhealthy relationships in the past, and went, what? Like I all of a sudden became the unicorn, right? Because I said, no, my responsibility, I'm responsible for like taking care of my own emotional well-being. That's not your responsibility. And he was like, oh, the sun was coming out and blowing behind me.
Exactly. I mean, that's what secure attachment looks like, is you're responsible 90% of the time for your own happiness, 10% that of your partner contributes. Because, trust is a track record, but it's also internal. The problem with anxious is that when a person shows up as secure, they've got a filter for the world that says, ways I'm not going to be seen, ways I'm going to be betrayed, ways love is going to go away, ways if they've been cheated on, ways they're going to cheat. And a brain in search of evidence is going to find it. And the problem with this level of trust is a track record. But if you are filtering for the negative, you discount it. And when it gets discounted, no amount of evidence will give you the track record for your brain. This is why dealing with anxious is an internal job. I once dealt with a guy that had anxious attachment. And he had 2 marriages, both about 10 years. And his whole thing was, when does love go away? When will they turn against me? And at the 10-year mark, both of these very secure women said, I'm done. Because I can never get your trust. Now, that's the big thing. It's the trust level, but it's an interior job. If we're expecting that unicorn partner to show up, that one day, Mr. and Ms. Magic will show up, who's always trustful and will never do anything that suspects things. I mean, think of the person that is very secure and they check their phone messages and somebody says, and the anxious will say, who are you talking to? And it's done with that sense of, are you cheating on me? Right? So then the person, or they say, or who you seeing? So then the person starts just to avoid it, starts not opening up text messages in front of you, and then you notice a change of behavior, and you're creating the confirming evidence. This is the real problem for anxiousness, is it really is self-fulfilling prophecy. And the key is to release that past brain, that fear that when will I not be seen? When will love go away? When will cheat? Cheating is a big thing, but then the next pays for the X. And that's not cool. That's
the
not
next pays for the X. I need to recap like 4 or 5 things you said, and then I want to talk about how to fix it. But there were some things that you said I just want to like, you said 3 or 4 times, trust is a track record. Brilliant, gold, right? Because sometimes people say, well, how do you decide when they're the one? And I said, there is no way to usurp time passing. Like,
Yeah.
we can, that is never a good idea. Like, how do I do so much self-work, or how do I look for these green flags in a way that time does not, and 10 years doesn't have to pass, but there has to be some trust built from a track record. I call it a pattern. Look for a pattern of behavior, right? So I love what you said. So I want to just lock that down, make sure everyone heard that. And then I also want to lock down the fact that it is an internal job. It is not, you don't have anxious attachment because the right person hasn't shown up.
That's right.
Right.
You know, and that track record for trust is a very specific track record. The research points out, I'm relying on Ed Tronick works and Claudia Gold's work, The Power of Discord. It's a great book, by the way. Trust is not where somebody never does anything that fails to meet your expectations of confidence. The fact of the matter is how do babies develop trust is the same way couples do. They did a study where they found out that, they thought mothers were just these intuitive geniuses that always got the thing right the first time. They found out that 70% of the time a baby cries, the mother is not giving the baby what they need, but eventually after having the wrong thing, but then they get it right. Moms are persistent and the baby learns, okay, there can be a disconnect. But give it time, our motto, it'll get done right. Couples don't learn trust by just simply always being attuned, always having everything. It is in the moments of disconnect. It is in the moments of disrepair. And trust is knowing that on the other side, we can rumble and we can tumble, but we will not crumble. That is the moment trust is born. So, most anxious are afraid of that disconnect. Oh my God, love just went away. It's not the same as the past, unless you've chosen something, and sometimes that can be the case. But in a normal relationship, there will be times when for an instant love goes away. Not the love in the relationship, but the disconnection, the ill attunement. Every couple has it because 91% of the time, the research points out, couples are not in a place where it's optimal to just be tuned into each other. And it's knowing that you can get, okay, we're in a fight, but it's all good. I can still remember being out to dinner at my son's wedding with my 2 best friends from high school. He invited them. And I'm looking at Ken and Nancy, and in the middle of this dinner that we're all having, just the 4 of us, right? Steve is over here. He goes back to 3rd grade, and they start having an egregious fight. And this goes on for like 5-10 minutes in the middle of Applebee's. And now this is the moment. They've been married 40 some years at the time. Very secure couple. And I look at Steve and I go, tell me I'm not going into session here in the middle of Applebee's. And Nancy just wheels and turns to me and says, stuff it, Salyer. Give us 5 minutes and we'll work this out. And then she goes back. She's doing and he's doing, but they both know. They will work it out. 5 minutes later, he makes some move and she laughs. She goes, I still think you're, and they're good. Mm-hmm. That's the confidence that the anxious can't get to because that first bit of disconnect reminds them of the old stuff. And when they blow up and get more and more anxious and they superheat and they go into reactive states, then the other person does not have the trust. Mm-hmm. And then they develop a part that comes, we all have parts, right? But that part develops within the relationship. How can I avoid that? And pretty soon the relationship is developing the same old patterns because somebody's trying to defend against that reactive state. I see this all the time in couples, and it's dealing with the pattern between them and then the anxiety within them. It's got to be some me work and some we work, is what I'm saying. Trust is that entire envelope, not just, oh, I'll find someone who's perfect. Gosh, don't we all wish we could be that?
So let's imagine you're talking to someone who is in the pre-work. Okay. So they haven't necessarily met the right one, but so they've heard, okay, I can't expect magic to fall from the sky. There's obviously some pre-work I need to do on my own anxious attachment so that I can give the space and breath and healthy, responsive, not reactive space to let a relationship develop in like the way it's supposed to, right? And I had a dear friend, and she did remind me, she goes, dating is supposed to be the fun part. It's not supposed to be the serious part, right? Because I did have a bit of anxious attachment when I was dating Ben. It was like, oh, is this, and it is scary if you're dating with kids, right? You don't want to have 20 people around your kids. Like, oh, maybe this will be your new stepfather. Maybe this will be right, So I give myself a bit of grace, and, we're very securely attached now. But what advice would you give to someone in that pre-work?
Okay. Yeah. And it is best to keep kids out of it. A real funny story was I never let my sons see anybody I dated after the divorce from 4 to 12. And the first time I introduced him at 12 to a woman I'm dating, afterwards I asked him, so what'd you think? And this 12-year-old looks at me and says, well, you could have had a blonde. And I looked at him, I said, if it wasn't for big-eyed brunettes, you wouldn't be here.
Oh, there you go. Now, my son is a blonde. My son says he wants a blonde wife at some point. I'm very offended.
I have to say, I was slack-jawed. I really couldn't believe my 12-year-old was lecturing me on dating, right? But the pre-work. So yeah, there's all sorts of good reasons to keep kids out of the mix, including little antidotes like that, right? There's 2 levels. I'm writing another book, a sequel to the book. And one of the main themes is love needs a calm brain and a calm body. So I'd like to separate it into 2. Whatever, in the book, Safely, I say there's 4 feelings that tell us we're secure: welcome with joy, worthy and nourished, cherished and protected, and empowered with choice. Welcome. Now, if you've been given these other feelings like unwelcome, particularly the anxious are usually running unworthy because that was there, not there, or maybe not so cherished, or unseen is another term you hear. They won't say uncherished, but they'll say, I never feel seen, I feel invisible. Or maybe not so empowered, I have to lose myself in a relationship. You
can imagine my thoughts on that one, considering the nature of this podcast. But I won't interrupt. You can imagine my advice on that one.
Oh yes. Those feelings run, and so long as they're there, the brain uses whatever feelings we've been given to pick. So it will depend. So if you feel unworthy, you tend to find takers. If you feel disempowered, you find someone to dominate you. But the worst part is when you get in that relationship and you're trying to build the trust, the moment anything reminds you of that, and you have a brain that does association, the moment someone is 10 minutes late picking up on something you said, or even 2 minutes late, right? The brain will go, oh, there's an overlap. And it could be like a little tiny 15% overlap, like in a Venn diagram. But the brain doesn't, that part of the brain that does safety says, nope, it's 100% just like mom, just like dad, just like that. And now you're living in the past, and you have these huge reactive states that don't do anything to have you respond to them, to be able to. And it's those reactive states that are killing killing the bond, killing the connection. And love needs more receptive states. more responsive states, but not reactive. And so long as that past pain, that old feeling, I'm unworthy, I'm unseen, and you've got to filter ways I'm not going to be responded to, ways I'm not going to be seen. And the brain does that whole thing where it says, oh, they're just like my father, they're just like my mother. Anytime I hear always and never, I know past pain is running. Every time I hear those words, those are your cues. You never, you always. And when you hear that, there has to be the ability to rework that pain individually. And then your body carries that. Your body carries that pain, and it gets used to being in a fight or flight state. It gets trained and ingrained. There is the element of using meditation, breathing, EFT tapping and breathing to calm your body, because we are not just, attachment is not just installed, we are embodied. And if you try to work on these feelings, and one of the things I do is I get my clients to work with their body too. If the 80% of the signals are coming up from the body to the brain, and those things have been grooved in the past, then you're working against the whole system. So you've got to be able to calm the body to support a calm brain, and a calm brain that sends, signals of worthy and empowered to the body, so the body relaxes. It's doing both of those so you can, one, pick better, but better yet, when you get in a relationship, the anxious are known for drama. They're known, that's otherwise known as reactivity. And so long as that happens, you can take that guy or that gal who has the green signals, and what he's getting or she's getting is red signals. And then you've said, well, there goes love again. And it can be a self-defeating process. So it's calming, and you've got to do the deep work. Your brain does not feel safe feeling empowered. You got to find the exact flavor. That's the work I do with clients. What exact flavor of safety? A person who, let's say someone feels disempowered because, they always, they had an intrusive parent and they always lose themselves in a relationship. They felt they were never given a permission to be the standard of their own experience. Mom or dad made those. That flavor of safety is very different than the person who feels disempowered because they were beaten within a hair of their life. That's a different flavor of safety, losing myself versus that threat. Or, and there can be disempowered because no matter, I had a narcissistic mother or father that never heard me. There's a different level. So it's not just doing a little mantra and using your prefrontal cortex says ways I'm empowered. Your brain is going to say, remember the last time I tried being empowered? If we don't work with the deep emotional knowing, it's an emotional knowing, not a logical thing. So we can do vision boards all day long. It's rewiring the emotional knowing deep in the brain that allows anxious behavior to feel welcomed and worthy and cherished and part of. When that happens, and working with the body, then you're in a way better place to pick, create, and maintain secure attachment. That's bringing into the micro moments, that's so to speak.
Gary, that's still something I'm working on. I mean, literally this morning, I was leaving the door to get kids ready for school. And I thought, the best thing I'm currently giving my kids is a calm nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've done enormous personal work in, right? So obviously I've done work in it in the past, but it's just this layer, right? I did EFT, the tapping stuff in the last week. Maybe it was yesterday, this process of, are you familiar with polyvagal theory?
Yeah, well, some of what I was saying.
Yes, I was listening to you.
Yeah, I've trained Stephen Porges, and I just try to say it very simple.
You do very well.
Yes, we want a ventral vagal response, not a dorsal or a parasympathetic, if we're going to get technical.
Yes, no, and my listeners are used to me here. I'm trying to bring it back to some things that they've heard before, right? So they know, and personal experience and just personal honesty to say, There is no greater gift you can give to the people in your life than, my opinion, a normalized stress response system.
Yeah, because a normalized stress center allows you to be in connective mode versus protective, otherwise known as a social engagement system, otherwise known as response. They're all talking the same thing. And every one of us, let's just be honest, nobody is perfect. A few months ago, I've done incredible amounts of work on myself. I'm usually pretty zen. I really am. I'm pretty good at managing any reactivity before it gets out. And
may I ask you this? Let me ask you this. So you just found the right spouse, right? And then it just magically worked out. So that's what work means, right? You just kind of ignore things. You're like, and then you just get the right dating app and you do the right dating profile, and all of a sudden it magically works out, right? Like that's what you meant by doing.
For me, I was not lonely. I was really looking for the right one. And we call ourselves the A-team because there's so much alignment. I mean, I knew from clients rushing into anything is no good way of being. But a couple of months ago, she turned off all of the lights in the front. We would watch TV. Now, I have never, ever, and then all of a sudden I realized, I said, turn the lights back on. And I realized, she goes, what? Tone of your voice. And I thought, I'm having a reactive state. Where did this come from? And this is something I hadn't worked on. I said, give me 10 minutes. I want to wait because, and I said, oh, it's always walking in and seeing an alcoholic mother in a house with the lights turned off and feeling like and I can't have any light. And I was mad. I did an email on this. I was mad because how was I going to read about dinosaurs in a dark house? And I thought, isn't that interesting? So in the next couple of days, I just went back and did some parts work on myself and told the little one, if you ever want to watch dinosaurs, we can get it, and this was just, but I was surprised. But the point being is we all have little tiny pockets of whatever. Dealing with that is a lifetime thing. Earn secure, which I would say that I am, does not mean perfect. It does not mean that we will not find some little tiny pockets here that could use a little help. It's a growth in progress, and that allows us to be human. That allows us to be intimate, and
in a relationship, right? So it was probably a couple of weeks ago. So I was in a past relationship where someone would get above me and they would scream, "You're wrong, wrong, wrong." Right? They would just scream like that I was wrong because they wanted to be right and they wanted me to be wrong. And so recently, Ben was sitting there talking, and there was some like business thing. Well, he's in consulting. So he literally brands, big time brands that you and I would all know. We'll say, like Samsung. Here, I'm just looking at something, Samsung, these, not Samsung, but these names that like everybody would know are paying him for business advice, right? So this is like obviously an area of expertise that I would be very faulty in my own decision-making processes to not take his advice on some things, right? This is him trying to help me. This is him loving me. This is his area of expertise, right? And man, he was giving me some advice, and it was just like, hey, maybe you should try this and this, or have you thought about this? And the reaction in my body that came up, like with this loving man who is giving me advice, and my gut reaction, I was just like, okay, I know you're saying the right thing. I also know I should listen to you. And my body's having a reaction right now. And so I really want to like schedule a meeting for us to talk about this, because I'm quite certain that you're telling me the right information. And my nervous system is also like going nuts right now. Like I either want to run out of the room or punch you. He was like, whoa.
Yes. Well, good for you. You know what the whoosh feels like. Most people don't know it. That's great.
Well, and I say that honestly online to say like, hey, this is what's actually going on and this is what it feels like. And there's not very many of those moments because of all the things that I've done. But to connect the dots to those pieces, to have someone who said they loved me and they would literally stand over me screaming that I'm wrong, no matter what I said, I was just wrong all the time. And then to have someone who loves me, who's saying, you want to think about this again, right? My brain connected those two pieces.
Yes. You know what I love is you recognized it and you had the wisdom to do a timeout rather than stay in. This is one thing the anxious don't do, because they can't do a timeout as easily as an avoidant can, right? And they want to say, no, don't you walk away. We got to solve this right now. And that's the last thing, because when your ventral vagal service, you turns off and you're in dorsal or parasympathetic and the social engagement is off, mirror neurons are offline, empathy, kindness, and everything comes from a harsh place. You cannot work it through. Beautiful for you that you, and then you came back and you made a repair. You didn't say, he was a coach that didn't say things right. That's what, you didn't get all defensive. You walked back, said, this is okay, this is my stuff, right?
Yes.
And then you made a repair. That's the other, no matter the anxious tend to like to demand repairs, but not so good at giving them unless they're in a fawn response where they give and give and they apologize and apologize. So there's that type too. So there's two different types there. But notice you did something very secure. You said, noticed inside, walked away, got yourself calm, then came back and made a repair. This is the essence of trust. He could trust that. This is that track record. Repair, you're in connect, disconnect, reconnect. You're in paired up, disrepaired, and then repaired. Beautiful. That's a microcosm for how every relationship builds trust. You did it in business, but same thing happens. Beautiful for you, Sarah. Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you. I'm still learning. He is good to me, and I have been through a lot of hard things, right? That just like you said, I don't want the next to pay for the ex. Like I love, and it could be a parent or whatever, for our listeners, I that's our responsibility, bringing our best self into parenting, relationships, whatever. So is that your main advice for the anxious attachment? That's what I'm hearing. And that's my advice that I give, is just to nourish the nervous system, one, to delay the response time, two.
You have to, when you are in that place, when you've just got to lock it down, you've got to recognize that state. Now, and you've got to recognize it. You got maybe with some people, it can be a 10-second window. You got to know when it's amping up and walk and say, look, I am feeling really whatever. And before I say something I will regret, give me time to walk away. The anxious tend to not want to make that move, and it always works against them. And the thing is when you do it, you promise to come back. You do that if you're avoiding too. And I will come back. And when you come back, you bring it up. And then you make a repair. And or you say your truth or what, from that calmer place. Without it, the art of all couples is to know that every couple gets triggered. I've even watched the Gottmans, which I've studied with, get triggered on stage. And I'm going, wow, I feel so much better now. And you got to know how to deal with it. And you can't deal with it in the moment. You got to get away.
That's exactly, that's why I'm happy to say, here's some stuff I've been working on the last 6 weeks. And, here's something happened in my relationship where, I'm saying my stuff, not his, as is appropriate, but it's just like, hey, whoa, this is still a process. And anyone who's acting like there isn't a process and it's just like, well, you should just be like us. We're basically Joseph and Mary and Jesus all wrapped up in one, right? It's like, whoa, watch out for those people. They are not true.
you tend to see that on social media. And I've literally seen couples that I knew were 3 weeks away from a divorce court putting out we're just lovey-dovey. And that's not intimacy either, And the thing is, if you're out there listening, everybody's body feels a little different when it's turning into fight or flight, right? And by the way, it's not just fight or flight. Constantly apologizing, giving, that's a fawn response. You got to know what that feeling feels like. Sometimes it's in the chest, sometimes it can be, sometimes it can be in your legs or your arms. There's some science behind that as well, because the basal ganglia knows how to protect you from the emotional pain, and it stores that pain in those areas. You've got to know what it feels like just before you do it.
And
then so you get that, give yourself that calm. And the more you meditate or do EFT inside, then the more you train your brain to give yourself the space that you need, the pause.
The way I describe it is, because every single one of my listeners have had a crocodile in their life, right? So there's in Buddha's Brain by Rick Hansen, there's this scene, and it's like, there's this beautiful water, and there's a lovely garden, and palm trees and coconuts and flowers. It's all beautiful. And then there's a crocodile. What is your brain going to pay attention to? The crocodile, right?
Yes.
And we want our brain to pay attention to the crocodile because that's what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to go into fight and flight if there's a crocodile. Now, many of my listeners and myself, oh, that's not a crocodile. Oh, no, it's just a bunny rabbit. Oh, no, it has fuzzy ears. It's fine. There's no crocodile. It's not gnawing off my arm. Oh, things are fine, right? So
exactly.
right? And when you've been through that, your nervous system gets really used to there being a crocodile. So you can't recognize the difference in there's a crocodile or a bunny rabbit. Everything feels like a crocodile, or you've convinced yourself that everything's a bunny rabbit.
Yes.
And either way, we got real problems.
Yeah, most times with a crocodile, we fight or flight. And I want to say something to women. When we get in these reactive moods because the old pain is running the anxiety, right? And we don't want to feel all that. The fight or flight came from James Cannon's research back in the 20s. And back in the 90s, some women researchers looked at his research, and they found out that Cannon said that we don't want to bias the research, so we're only going to use male rats, and we're only going to use male human subjects, because we wouldn't want to bias the subject for those quote unquote histrionic females, right? So there's fight and flight. Well, some women researchers were going, wow, what do we have here now? And they redid the original research and found out that some men can have it too, but there's a third response, which they call the fawn response: placating, giving, apologizing. Not that men can't do it, but it tended to be more predominantly in female rats and females. Giving, apologize. Oh, it's my bad. I'm certain that you're just a little bunny rabbit, and I must have looked like the crocodile to you. All those sort of responses, that's just as reactive as fight and flight and yelling and screaming. I want everybody to get that tendency to nurture, to try to make it better. And sometimes you need to rock the boat in a relationship too. You need to say, that hurts. That wasn't cool, right? That's part of secure too. So we want to get, it's not just fight and flight, but it's nurture. And you're right, telling yourself that a crocodile is a bunny rabbit, not the best thing. You have to be able to acknowledge the truth in a relationship, but in a secure way, not with harshness, because loving firmness does way more in a relationship. It does everything and more that harshness does. There's nothing that harshness does that loving firmness can't do. And that's the difference in a reactive state that, often we get to from the anxiousness, is we think all that resentment, grievances come out, and the harshness really is a way the next pays for it. Maybe they did do something wrong. Hey, that hurt, but it comes out in a way that's loaded, and they know they're paying for somebody else.
I'll tell you another story about me, Gary. You're getting all my personal stories. No one else does. I guess it's because we've talked about other stuff. But I remember when my husband was traveling a lot for work, and I said, and he was like, "Oh, what do you want to do this weekend?" And he was like, "Oh, let's just stay home." And I was like, "Oh, well, you may have been out to nice business dinners all week, but I haven't been out to nice business dinners all week. I need a date." And I said it just like that, right? So it wasn't passive aggressive. I'm not going to talk to you and you have to figure it out. It wasn't, how dare you do this? You're such a jerk. You've been gone all week. And now, because he just like he was thinking like, oh, I've been gone eating out in these restaurants all week. I want to eat at home. And I was like, that's a bad deal for me. No, you need to you know, and it was that energy behind it, right? So I was thinking that might be an example of the loving firm. It was like, no. For me to feel loved and appreciated, our habit used to be going on dates. So I want to continue that habit, whether or not you've been at business centers or not. I still want to go on a date.
I think in secure couples, you're always dating each other. You're always flirting with each other. You said something about, that was the fun part. And, now it's serious. Well, one of the secure feelings is welcomed with, what did I say? Joy. There needs to be joy in dates. That needs to be continuing. And to be honest with you, as a man, if you don't continue to woo your woman, let's just say, not everything is as available as you once hoped it would be. I've told male clients who've gotten into ruts like that, that's the long way to the bedroom.
I agree.
I'm just telling you it's a long way. That's if you want the long path, there you go. But but dating is something we need. Yes, there's the seriousness part. And, it's absolutely true that every couple that's come to me, I have never heard them complaining about anything that occurs on a Hallmark card. It's always much more personal and pragmatic. But we need to have that feeling of we're just a couple again. We're just enjoying each other. You can do that at home, but you can take her out somewhere, find times to really let her know that she lights you up the same way it always was, and I can still remember when I was in college, a professor in my marriage and family degree brought in 3 couples, couple that was just married. They had just been students last year. And I remember thinking, she actually married him. Then there was an old couple who were about 48, right? 21, right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And then there was this couple that was married 63 years, and he was 93 and she was 88. And I can still remember her saying, she goes, he still grabs me and pinches my butt. She goes, and he goes, you're just as cute as ever. She goes, I know, honey. They had the best flirting on the planet. You should, you just had to have been there to watch this 93-year-old and 88 flirt with each other. And I remember thinking, I want that when I'm that age. Yeah. They were not old. You could still see the couple who met in their 20s with them. You could still see it. And I think real love, secure love, it brings that out in us.
I love it. I feel very fortunate to have that. We're having a home date tonight. I bought him ribeyes at the grocery store and came home with ribeyes and ice cream. And he was just like, thank you so much. You're the best wife ever. That's my real day today, and I'm grateful for it. And, really going back to getting past that anxious attachment of not having to lock things down immediately, not ignoring the red flags, not, just creating distance and space to nourish your nervous system. It sounds like what you were saying, just developing a habit of nourishing your nervous system. And then when you're emotionally flooded, giving yourself some space before that reaction. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yes. And if there's a man watching this, you can do this with any partner if you're, non-binary. Mm-hmm. But there's 2 things. Track and make a mental list, these called love maps, of what makes them feel safe and what makes them feel special. And then freaking give it to them. One of the things I know is she loves the wow. Wow, you're great. A lot of women do. But
a lot of women do, yes.
A lot of women do. And what makes them safe and what makes them calm down is another one. And special, safe, special. If you can track and give it to them ahead of time, don't wait for them to ask. Really good attachment, worthy. That feeling of worthy isn't just, can I ask and you'll give it to me? Real secure feeling of worthy is, I know what she or he needs, and I will do my best to give it ahead of time. When
I think women
couples get there, that's when real trust develops.
Yeah, I think it's funny on my coaching of women. I'm like, no, you need to ask, you know, but I 100% can hear you say to the guy, don't make her ask. I think we're both right.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking mind reading. I'm talking based on, and sometimes it's okay to say, whoa, that wasn't what I needed at the moment, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's okay to ask, well, what do you really need right now, right? We're not talking mind reading. So the anxious love that. This is not mind reading, but based on, I just found out that she tends to, when she just really needs a hug. Some people don't need a hug. They need a calming word, and you just learn, or you learn what voice to use. It's different with different people. A lot of it is vocal inflection, right? You just learn each other and what each other needs. And then when you can do that ahead of time, and if you're anxious, find someone that's good at tracking what we call love maps. The secure tend to do that. No man is a mind reader. I'm a horrible mind reader. I would rather die than be in a relationship where I'm demanded to mind read, because you even with as much as I know and as many couples as I've seen, you can't get it right with mind readers because it changes every day. But, and it's okay to say, honey, this is what I need. It's okay. That's worthy. And for most partners, I'd rather be told up front. If you're doing, instead of griping about what you didn't get, real worthiness gives them a recipe for success, not criticizing what you didn't get, but in a secure. Worthy says, I kind of noticed that this last week you were out a lot and whining and dining your clients, and and you'd like to stay home. And the story I tell myself is, I'm at home with the kids and I'm bored silly, and I'm not feeling very special at the moment. So could we just go and I really need to be wined and dined, and I want to go to the Red Lobster, right?
Was that Applebee's?
That's a feedback loop. Now you did it pretty damn well. But you can say that. You can say that, honey, what I've done, or you give each other a recipe for success.
Well, we had
go ahead.
We had an agreement going into marriage because we were so happy dating. It was like, let's change as little as possible. So that was like, not a written contract or anything. That was a real verbal agreement we had, and I was basically taking him back to the agreement, like, hey, you said we were going to keep going on dates. And, if you want me to look cute, dress up in a dress, I want somewhere to go. Right. Like, and both of us were like, sounds good. Like, sounds like a good deal. Right.
A lot of men don't get that. When you stop dating her, she stops looking cute. And then they gripe, well, she's always in sweatpants. Well, if you never take her anywhere special, why not? And then of course, kids come along and will inevitably change a relationship. 68% of couples that have kids have a huge precipitous drop. It's how you deal with it. And the other thing that's important here is, Harvard did a study and noticed that about tracking people from 15 to 75, and they had them write stories about who they were. And by 75, when they read what they said 60 years ago, they didn't even recognize the person. What they found is about every 10, 12, 13 years, people's core identities change. And I can go back to the couple that flirted. Somebody, we're in this class, and this very disrespectful football player looked at this guy and says, so what's it like being married to the same woman for 63 years? And the guy really didn't care for the tone of the football player's word. And his first words were, well, son, if you're lucky enough to be married 63 years. And he says, you've got another thing coming. He says, I have not been married to the same woman. She goes, my wife has been 5 different women. And my marriage and how I showed up as a husband had to change with each one. And then he talked about the 5 women he's been married to. And I swear to God, that woman lit up like a Christmas tree or a Hanukkah tree. I guess there aren't Hanukkah trees, but Hanukkah lights, right?
Yeah,
you could see the glow of a well-loved woman. And her nodding. Now, in any long-term relationship, we all grow. Sometimes the anxious want to lock things down. We never want it to change, but it must grow. We must grow with each other. Keeping the essentials, yes, dating and things like that. But just know too, that when those inevitable changes, it's not love going away, it's love deepening, right? Whatever. I can think of a couple I knew that at 25 years, she was done with corporate. She wanted to do Reiki. And he was all this woo-woo stuff. And she said, look, this is where I'm going. And the funny thing was, when he said, okay, I'll get behind it, he was a lawyer, and watching her right to recreate herself, he says, 2 years later, he comes in and says, I'm bored being an attorney, and becomes a chef.
Yeah.
She left corporate, he left attorney, but this is a right to create your own experience, which I talk about. That's being empowered. We don't stay the same. The marriage cannot stay the same. It must evolve and adapt. And behavioral flexibility is the mark of a well-integrated brain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And being adaptable with each other, not saying what was, the core promises of fidelity and loving and trusting, those never change. But how they're delivered, that's a different thing. And so in good relationships, sometimes couples come to me at the 20 or 25 year because they have not allowed each other, or they haven't been wise enough to notice the contract needs changing. How many of us would love to have a computer without have the old DOS things? I remember I once had an old computer that couldn't run the internet. You needed an upgrade so you could do things.
I love it. Gary, I know I've recommended your book to tons of my clients, and they have absolutely loved it. Tell people where they can find your book and more about you.
Well, my book is on Amazon, Safe to Love Again, How to Release the Pain of Past Relationships and Create the Love You Deserve. You can also, I've got some cool videos. You can also see me at GarySalyer.com. If you got any questions from this, write me. There's a little contact page. But Amazon or GarySalyer.com, all that good stuff.
Gary, this is your second time, and I'm sure not your last, on the Toxic Person Proof podcast. So you guys can check out his other interview. We'll put it in the show notes and the links to that. And thank you so much.
Yes, and I refer your book to clients too. It's a wonderful book, Sarah. It really is beautiful, heartfelt. Kudos.
Thank you. Gearing up for number 2. So and ready to read your number 2. So thank you so much.
Thank you.